Hello everybody, this is Katje. I wanted to share a video with you today. Recently I did finally purchase these calf-length leather boots that I was mentioning in one of my last videos, and I'm very pleased with them. They're very comfortable and they go very nicely with this short skirt and this cute top that I got from Forever 21. So I'm very pleased with these purchases, and I just wanted to model them for you a little bit and also just maybe share a couple of reflections with you this afternoon. I promise I won't do any philosophy this time. But what I wanted to talk about is one of my other favorite subjects. I do enjoy good horror films, especially when they're not slasher films, but when they are more psychological and so deal more with sort of what's going on in your mind and that kind of fear. And one of the films that I really enjoyed, although there are some problems maybe with it, is the Blair Witch Project. This was a film I think that was made back in, what was it, 1999 or 2000, sometime around those years. And it had to do with three young people who wanted to make a documentary about a witch. And so they went into the woods and they brought camera and sound equipment with them. And what happened over the course of time is that it seemed that what they thought initially was just kind of a legend or was maybe a myth actually turned out to be real, and they were being stalked by this witch who would make these very creepy noises in the forest around them and would start to interfere with them, and each day she would get a little bit closer until at the end of the film the three of them mysteriously disappear and they're never heard from again. Now, what I want to do in some of my videos, if I do some more, like this one, about horror films, is that I want to dig a little bit deeper and try to say how I think that this is a very interesting horror film, that there's some interesting ideas that are sort of below the surface there. So let me say a little something about that in connection with the Blair Witch. So one thing that you'll notice if you watch this film is that a lot of the reality is filtered through the cameras and the sound equipment, the audio-visual equipment that the three young filmmakers bring with them into the woods. And so this is almost like a metaphor or an image, let's say, for technology and the kind of view on reality that technology gives us. So these young people are looking at everything through the lens of a camera, or they're hearing a lot of things through the speaker of a sound equipment. And the problem is, in the film, the witch is never really captured on film. Or you hear her moving around and making these very strange noises in the woods, but you never see her. And so I found this very interesting. In a way, it's that the technology that the people have brought along with them is not really capturing the truth of their situation, which is that they're being stalked by a witch, an evil witch in the woods. On the other hand, early in the film, they go and they talk to various townspeople about the Blair Witch legend, and these people have all kinds of information about, well, how did this person become a witch? She was basically accused of poisoning some children and was abandoned back in the 18th century by the townspeople in the woods. She mysteriously disappeared, and then the children started and presumably died in the woods, although the body was never found, and then children started disappearing. And so there are all these stories about her, these legends or stories about her that have been passed down through time by the members of this little community. And some of them are very eccentric, and some of them are rather odd. Some of them seem like fairly normal people, but all of them, even though one or two may be skeptical about the Blair Witch, all of them are basically familiar with the essentials of what happened to her and where she's supposed to be now. And a lot of them, whatever they think, they don't go out into the woods. They are respectful enough of this legend not to test it. So here, it seems to me in the film, we have an example of like a traditional community, the lore of a traditional community. Whatever mistakes or problems there might be with it is actually more accurate, and it has more to do with the reality of the situation than all the gadgetry and gadgets and technological toys that the three young people bring along. That doesn't really capture reality. What does is this community that's steeped in this legend, that's steeped in this story of the Blair Witch. So there's a kind of tension there between tradition and technology that I found very interesting. Now let me say just a couple of other things before I stop for today, and then I'll do a couple of turns with my new outfit, final turns. Another interesting thing to me is that it's not that the young people who, when they go into the woods, it's not that they completely dismiss this legend of the Blair Witch. At one point, one of the main characters, I think it's Heather and Josh and Michael. So Heather is she's in control of the entire project. And so before they go into the woods, they go have lunch in this diner in the town. And she admits that the legend is kind of creepy and that it needs to be treated with respect, and she wants to document it. At another point, when they go into the woods and eventually they get lost and disoriented, presumably through the black magic or the special supernatural powers of this witch, when that happens, before that happens, or when it starts to happen, as they get deeper into the woods, they come across these small piles of stones. And at one point, one of the other young people on the documentation team, the documentary team, knocks one of those piles of stones over. And so Heather then reaches down and she kisses her hand and she puts the stones back, almost kind of like a ritualistic gesture, indicating that she's not completely skeptical that there might be something going on here more than just everyday natural phenomena or things that we can understand through natural science. She even says at one point when Josh asks her early on in the film, shortly after they go off into the woods, he says, well, what do you think about the Blair Witch? Do you think that this is real? And she says, I don't know, I'm not sure. Now, to me, what's odd about this is that you have, if somebody on any level thinks, it's not really about whether it's right or not, if somebody on some level psychologically believes that there might be some kind of malevolent being out in the woods, why on earth would you possibly go out there completely unprepared? They don't bring any kind of crosses or rosary or any kind of, some kind of a charm or anything to protect themselves from this malevolent being, even though on some level they seem to take seriously the possibility, at least, of there being a witch in the woods. And there's another wonderful scene in the film early on when they're interviewing this very eccentric lady who had some experience of the Blair Witch allegedly when she was a little girl, and she looks completely frazzled and strange, and she looks like somebody who's just walked out of a mental ward. I think she's holding onto a Bible and she has a rosary around her neck. So your initial impression is, well, she's the crazy person, and she's they're making fun of her and mocking her on the way to the hotel room the night before they go into the woods. But when you step back and see what happens in the film, if anybody is crazy or mentally unhinged, it's the three of them, because they go off into the woods, not ruling out the possibility, even on some level thinking that there might be a Blair Witch. They do that, and yet they're totally unprepared. Unlike this, I think her name was Mary Brown, who has a Bible and a rosary, and she may be crazy as a cuckoo, but on some level she takes it seriously, and she's prepared in a way that they're not. So that's one of those other wonderful contrasts that you can find in this film on a deeper level if you dig a little bit deeper. Going back to the first point, Josh, towards the end of the film, when it's clear that the witch is stalking them and drawing closer and closer, and eventually will cause them to disappear, whatever exactly happened to them is never entirely made clear, but presumably she kills them. And at one point, I believe he's actually disemboweled in a very gruesome way. But before that happens, he says to Heather, in a very critical vein, he says, well, you're looking at everything through a filtered reality. That means the camera and the sound system. You're looking at that, you're not really appreciating the full gravity of the situation. And I think we can see that he's right about that. Now, finally, I would like to say one last thing, and this goes back to some experiences that I've had when I was growing up and spending time in the woods as a child and as a young person. Now, I've never encountered a witch. I've never had any experience like that. But there have been times, as I mentioned before, when I have felt that there are these strange presences or at least one of them, in the woods around where I grew up. And I also know that it was important, it was something that I learned over time, and that is when you go into the forest, you need to, in a place like that, that's very old and has a lot of history behind it and maybe other things that are going on there that we don't understand very well, spiritual things or something like that, it's very important to be prepared, not just in terms of food and water and having a compass and knowing where you are and letting people know where you are in case you go missing, but also psychologically, mentally, and spiritually prepared. Because my experience is that there would be times when I would go into the woods and when I was by myself in that great, immense solitude of the forest, sometimes you find your mind taking peculiar turns. It will take a strange twist or turn, and you start thinking about possibilities that you wouldn't ordinarily think about. So I remember one time when I was in the woods, and I was hiking up a creek, and the creek was becoming increasingly more difficult to follow the bank of the creek because more and more foliage was growing, more trees, more plants. And I remember at some point it was almost like something was drawing me on and almost tempting me to keep going into this creek where there weren't any human beings, where it was becoming increasingly remote. And I don't know what the outcome of that would have been, but it would have been presumably not a good one. And so I felt like there was something drawing me on that I needed to resist. And I needed to be mentally and spiritually prepared for that. It's not a good idea to go into nature or any other foreign environment where there's strange things unprepared. And so that's what I wanted to say. And again, I'm in a kind of a witchy mood this afternoon as we're getting close to Halloween. And I'm enjoying my new outfit with my new boots and my short skirt and my cute top. So because I'm feeling good, I wanted to share some of these reflections with you. I look forward to talking to you again very soon. So this is Katje, and until next time, I wish everybody a wonderful day. Bye-bye.